that defensive line position is probably our deepest position. With Breeland, different scheme when we got here, and I thought he and our staff really thought his rookie year did some things that you can really lay a foundation on. And, we all know that he came in a little out of shape the next year, and then he had the injury. So I think when you get behind the eight ball in professional football, it's tough. And then when you get behind the eight ball on a roster with a deep defensive line, it's even tougher. We'll say this, credit to the kid. He did come in shape and worked hard to get that weight off. Again, he was just up against a very deep and talented defensive line class, and in our staff and both coaching and personnel staff, and we were always committed to doing what we feel is best for the team and playing the best players and the guys that were on our active roster. We felt that day by day and the way they graded out, that they just performed better and they deserved to be on the team.
Let's go to Herbie. Go ahead, Herbie.
Hey, Brett, good morning. You mentioned wanting to make the roster better as the season goes on. And yesterday at the deadline, the league-wide deadline, you had some intriguing names out there from Lamar Miller, Clowney, Devonta Freeman, Adrian Peterson, Sidney Jones. How much does the protocols as far as COVID testing and then even the Thursday night game affect how you approach free agency this first weekend? And Brad, I'll probably have a follow-up to that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we even talked about some of these guys that we're identifying for the practice squad, not even having them here. As you mentioned, Herbie, these guys will have to go through, I believe, 2 days of testing. And once these guys clear waivers, if they're on the street, then it's going to be 3 days. So it certainly puts us in a bind where, the guys that you want to bring in either on the active or practice squad, there's going to be a delay in that. I would say, to answer your question, all that goes into play, certainly the delay in regards to when we can get them. I think the one good thing, and we've talked about this yesterday, was having a Thursday game will help us moving forward. So we'll be able to utilize those 2 or 3 days of COVID testing with the extended weekend. So that will be a benefit, having a Thursday practice, to be able to kind of recalibrate our roster, both active and practice squad, knowing that we can get guys in over the weekend and knock the tests out. But I would say it all comes into play, the contract, injury history, and then the COVID testing, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and Brett, here's a follow-up. I'm glad you touched on that, Brett, because last year you were able to bring in guys like Mike Pennell, Wisniewski, Damone Harris, even Suggs late in the season. How much do you think the COVID protocols will limit what you will be able to try to do during the season?
I don't know if it will limit to the extent of not doing things. It will just delay their ability to get on the field and help us as quickly. I think that's the big thing. I think when there's a need, unless the need or the injury or the scenario that you encounter is only a 1 week or 2 week injury. I mean, when you talk about some of the moves we made, I mean, we had, like, on the offensive line, we had guys that, like, Rankin missed the season. We had guys like, Ogba, Okafor missed the season. So you're still going to have to make those moves. Unfortunately, for us and for really all teams, there's going to be a delay in regards to how quickly those guys can get acclimated and get on the field.
Go to Adam Teicher. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Brad, how you doing today?
Good, Adam. How you doing?
Hey, one question about Breeland Speaks and one on another subject. First on Speaks, he came in, as you mentioned, he played a different position. And last year he missed all year because of the injury. And then this year with the shortened camp and no preseason games, was there any thought among you or your staff that maybe you didn't give him a fair chance? And Brad, I'll have one more thing to follow up.
Well, I think that, to your question, Adam, guys certainly handle rehab situations differently and how they come back. Everyone kind of progresses at different rates. And listen, without having any medical documentation in front of me, I would say that bigger people, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, are probably a little bit slower to come back in regards to skilled players, running backs, receivers, safeties, what have you. But again, you go back to the scenario in which we were in. He did come back into camp and lost weight and was healthy and was able to practice throughout the course of the preseason. And, he worked hard to put himself in that position. So when guys are ready to go, we defer to the medical expertise of our staff and we let them go out there and compete and see how everything shakes out. Again, it certainly did put him behind the eight ball in that regard. Not having a year of football is, again, certainly going to be tough. And then when you throw in the factor of having, Clark and Tano and Okafor, Taco had a good camp. Obviously, he made the roster, and Mike Dana had a really good camp. So it was just one of those scenarios for him where, having the year off, having to go through a lengthy rehab process and going out there competing against a deep defensive line was a tough ask. And he competed his tail off, and I'm sure he'll learn a lot from this experience here, and it'll help him in the future. And I'm sorry, your second question was?
Cornerback. I thought because of Bashaud Breeland's suspension, maybe you guys would have made a move for a veteran guy like you have the last couple of years, but you didn't, although I know you still could. But it certainly looks at this point like the guys you have on the roster right now will be the guys you go with, at least against Houston. So I just wondered what you saw from guys like Fenton and Hamilton and Snead during camp the last month or so that leads you to be pretty confident they'll hold up well. Yeah,
well, we were certainly encouraged by the way these guys played. And Adam, most of you guys have seen these guys kind of grow and develop. And I would say to your question that we obviously always keep open dialogue, and we're always looking to improve our roster. And that was probably something on our mind early on in camp. And as camp progressed and these guys really start to make some big movements in regards to their development, we became encouraged. Now, with Bashaud Breeland being out 4 weeks, we're all aware there could be some growing pains and some lumps along the way. Think back to Charvarius Ward when he was kind of forced in the action his rookie year, and he learned a lot in that Seattle game. They kind of attacked him, but he continued to grow and develop. And then that Colts playoff game, he built on that, and he continues to grow and develop into, one of the better corners out there. So I think we're kind of looking at it in regards to that growth and maturation process with these guys, where we've seen it already in camp with guys like Snead, Fenton in his second year. Keys was out there a little late. Hamilton we just got, but these guys have gotten better and better every week. And knowing the scheme and being in the Zoom meetings all off season and knowing what our coaches are asking them, that's going to be hard to replicate in a short amount of time. We'll always continue to look what's out there and if we can get better and how we can get better. But we feel like, we have some good young corners, and again, there'll be some learning and growth early on, but with Ward being an established corner and Snead, and Keys, we feel like those guys are going to be pretty good players, and we're excited about Hamilton, what he can do in all phases of the game. So we'll continue to monitor that situation, but I think we're happy with the competition and the talent right now.
Let's go to Matt McMullen. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Brett. So we've talked a lot about the continuity on this team over the entire offseason. But some of the additions that you've made in free agency, the draft, you've had a chance to watch them in camp now. What excites you about those guys that have enhanced this roster now going into the season?
Well, anytime you get a chance to add new talent and create more competition is always exciting. And I think the guys we were able to bring in free agency, have done that. They've added depth and competition to this locker room. And Mike Remmers has had a chance to bounce around at guard and tackle. Hamilton, as we just mentioned, he's a guy that I know Dave Tobe's excited about on special teams, and he's kind of bounced around from outside to inside to some safety. So we're excited about his versatility. And, this rookie class, we're certainly excited about it. I think that there's a good chance that really all these rookies, have a chance to go out there on Thursday night and really help us from Clyde to Willie Gay, LJ, I think Mike Dana. There's been, the Tashawn Wharton we've talked about, Tommy Townsend. So it's just exciting to usher in some new talent and know that these guys are going to have lasting impacts on this organization and do some great things for us. So anytime you bring in new talent, whether they're free agents or draft picks, everyone brings their own little unique energy to the building. So it's just been fun watching these guys provide that to this locker room.
Go to Pete Sweeney. Go ahead, Pete.
Hey, Brett, I was curious about the running back room. I know Clyde's the guy. We've talked a lot about Clyde. What have you seen in Darryl to sort of make him emerge there, and then why Darwin over DeAndre?
Well, I would say with hitting Darryl first, he's one of those guys that he's been here for such a long time, and there's a lot of trust in regards to his ability in all phases of the game, running and blocking, in particular pass pro too. I mean, he's really good in pass pro. He's taught Clyde a lot. Certainly, we're all excited about Clyde. We know what he can do, and he'll continue to learn and grow. And we think certainly he has a extremely high ceiling. And Darwin was a guy that really had the upper hand and held on to it. Having been here a year, having gone through a Super Bowl run with us, being a contributor on special teams, he got some stiff competition from DeAndre, but he was able to answer the call and hold on to that position. That was a close battle, but give Darwin a lot of credit for coming into work every day and staying focused on the task at hand. Hopefully, as the waiver wire comes out here at some point, we'd like to potentially get DeAndre back if we can and get him in the mix here, because we think he's a good player. But again, a lot of the credit goes to Darwin and his ability to kind of just come in every day and not get distracted and hold on to that job.
We've got time for a few more guys. We'll go right down the line. Let's go Harold, Matt, and then Nate. Go ahead, Harold.
Hey, Brett.
Hey, Harold.
I just want to talk about the undrafted free agents you got. You mentioned Breeland, but give some credit to Treshawn Wharton here. How the process of finding him, I'm sure, being a UDFA, but then how impressed were you over the course of the camp that he got progressed to the point where you feel very comfortable with him on a 53-man roster, and also the other Mizzou guy, Yasir Durant, on offensive line, just the local guys and how you're confident on their abilities to 53-man roster.
Yeah, and Wharton's been a great story. Going through the process here, he certainly jumped out for us as a staff at the East-West game. He had a chance to go down there and compete, and watching the drill work and watch him in the game, we certainly thought he was intriguing. And then when you go back and watch his college tape, it was a little bit choppy, and then you kind of do some more digging and homework, and you realize he was battling through a high ankle sprain, and he wasn't quite right the whole season. And fortunately for us, after the draft was over, we were able to sign him. And really the first day that we had players in the building just going out there and watching group work, he just kind of stood out. I mean, he was really twitchy, athletic, worked his tail off. So then the next question is, all right, well, wait till we put the pads on. And he kind of carried that over and was able to make plays. And then it was like, all right, well, let's see how he does against better competition. He's doing this against the threes, so let's put him up there versus the twos and the ones. And I mean, the kid just found a way to make plays and continue to get better and just answer the bell at each step. So whether it was from not being drafted to looking good in drill work, but not knowing how that was going to translate to with the pads on, to the running good and against the threes, but let's see how he does against the twos, to the ones. I mean, he just kind of answered the bell and flashed at every step of the way. And credit to Brendan Daly for his excellent coaching job and continue to teach him and get more out of him. And he'll be another guy that the next question will be, okay, can he do it in a real game now against a team that is, schematically doing things to put these guys into, unfavorable positions. So, that'll be the next challenge. But again, knowing that this kid has been here for such a long time now, and he's worked hard, he's been very dedicated, pro on and off the field, and attacks every day. We're excited about him. And then, with Yasir Durant, I mean, he was a guy that, we were, again, very fortunate to get him as a free agent, and he's got some versatility in his game, can play tackle, can play guard. Still a long way to go with him in regards to, just knowing exactly the ins and outs of all the checks and different adjustments that our offensive line makes throughout the course of the game. But he's come a long way as well, and he continues to grow and develop. But like all these young guys, they're just going to have to continue to work, because, we're going to put an emphasis on bringing new guys in at every phase and up the ante in regards to competition. But so far, these young guys have done a great job of working through what's been a really unique offseason, and handling that adversity and responding and earning spots on a talented roster.
Let's go to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Brett, following up a bit on what Herbie asked about some of the changes with COVID-19 protocols, you're going to be able to have larger and more experienced practice squads. You're going to have the advantage of being able to bring up practice squad guy players on game day. I'm just curious about what you think about the new rules and how you might be able to use them to your advantage, especially when, having like a guy like Matt Moore on the practice squad maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fluid situation, and hopefully one that everyone is kind of working through is, an outbreak. So hopefully we don't have that situation. But I think the flexibility to bring guys up for the game and then potentially bring them down. I think it's a really good thing for teams to not pin themselves in awkward situations with players and contracts and exposing them to waiver wires. So it'll be, I think a collective effort in regards to just utilizing all of the modifications in place to our advantage, and it'll certainly be on a week-to-week basis. But, I think the flexibility of bringing guys up and then down for a certain amount of weeks is something that, we don't have to subject guys to waiver wires, and we know that we can put people in better positions in regards to if they need an additional week off and not have to try to, squeeze extra games out of guys. So that in regards to keeping veteran players on the roster, I think is a big deal too, where we have chances and opportunities for guys to continue to grow and develop and play them when we feel like they're mentally and physically ready. So I think it also helps, I think, from a long-term growth and maturation process there too. But I think it'll all be determined by the environment, both injury related and pandemic potentially related. And, we'll certainly work and massage those rules the best we can and put our players in as best positions as possible.
Let's go to Nate Taylor to close us out. Go ahead, Nate.
Hey, Brett, wanted to ask you about the receiving group. Every year it's sort of a difficult task to get that number down to where you want it. Just what was the overall decisions and obviously the return of Marcus Kemp to the roster? And then secondly, you're known as somebody who makes deals or tries to make deals kind of around this time. Just how much did the offseason, no preseason games, and obviously the pandemic play into a factor in terms of trying to find some level of negotiation and not getting a deal done?
Well, I'll answer that first question right off the bat. It was extremely unique. I think that the last few off seasons, and I had just I was talking to Matt Nagy last night on my drive home. The first two off seasons, I would say by 2 or 3 days before the cutdown day, I think I've heard from 10 to 12 to 14 teams. As of yesterday at cutdown day, I heard from one team. And I think it's just the lack of tape. And even if you think a guy, not seeing him for a full calendar year, it's very tough. And, where is he at injury-wise? How's he playing? Did he regress? Did he improve? So it's hard when you haven't had these guys. And there's still that aspect of still getting to know some of your young guys because you haven't had them for the OTAs or the rookie camps. And then, again, just getting to a point where you feel confident in your roster and where you are, it's a big unknown to potentially make a deal or trade for someone that you haven't seen in over a year, or you're just basing it off of college tape. So I think the fact that I got only one call was surprising. But then when you look, as you mentioned, Nate, of the lack of trades deals, I think every team was going through that same type of scenario where the unknown is just with what we're going through, and then the testing and having to put guys into a 2 or 3 day hold was they were all big obstacles to overcome. As far as receivers, listen, it's a tough room. There was a lot of talk about potentially just keeping 5, going back and forth with some other positions. Everyone knows that Tyreek and Sammy and McCole and D-Rob are just legit players. And then Pringle, with the job he did last year, I think he kind of stood out on that 5th spot because he's a guy that continues to grow and gets better. But it always comes down to special teams. And I know you guys know that Dave talked about Marcus Kemp and the job that he did, and he was one of our better special teams performers before he got hurt. He came back, credit to the kid. I mean, the kid worked his tail off. We signed the kid a week into the start of camp, not knowing what type of condition he was in and how he responded after all that rehab process. But he came back, he got acclimated very quickly. He showed that he did all the work on his own, and he was able to quickly get up to speed. And he's one of those guys that, we put a high priority on special teams, and we know how valuable that is. And he was a guy that certainly Dave was high on and has been high on. And we always talk about those tail end roster spots to get on this team and to fill out those depth level positions. You got to play on teams, and he's a guy that does that really well.
Brett, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.